The Fiat 500. Cute, stylish, gutless. Just a little too much like the cars that clowns drive in a circus. Until now. Let's drive the 2012 Fiat 500 Abarth and check the tech. Abarth. That's not an acronym. It's a guy's name, Carlo Abarth, the famous Austrian masochist who devoted much of his life to making Fiats go fast. We've got 17s on here, but 16s that look like that are stock. I'd pass on the tape stripe and a much more ballsier kind of a rear end with a splitter and a little wing above the glass. Now let's go inside. Okay, from our previous Fiat 500 video, you recognize this cabin. Cutesy and retro in its own way, but not so over the top as a Mini. The concentric gauges are here, speedo on the outside, tack in the middle, a little info display in the center there. That's frustrating because you can never get it to the right brightness because it's so much brighter at night than the gauges around it. This is new over here, the turbo gauge, because the Abarth has a turbo. Yes, it actually does get that much boost, apparently, up to 18, even 20 PSI. This would be your only head unit. There's not a lot of tech here, as you can see, but the basic sources. Now, hooking up your iOS device here in the glove box will give you a nice, very simple connection to the dash. It doesn't give you a lot of interface to work with because we've got a real limited display. Now, you may notice right above there, I've got what appears to be a clip-on TomTom unit. It's actually a factory TomTom unit that goes into this little port here on the dash. Now, after I figured out the world's most convoluted pairing, where this has to pair to the head unit, my phone had to pair to the TomTom, and there's probably one more loop here I missed. You get this, a car menu that's actually quite valuable, alongside navigation. Under this, you'll find Eco Drive. This will show you live whether you're driving greenly, or in this car's case, not so greenly. You've also got the ability to drop in to this area here where you've got your phone in a much more graphical interface than on that ribbon display. And finally, if you head over here, you're going to find your media player. Again, that is the wired player that is in the glove box, not Bluetooth streaming. Down here is your one-choice only gearbox, 5-speed manual, no automatic yet. There's an expectation the Abarth will get an automatic for broader market appeal, but so far they're doing it right. It's a small thing, but this whole array of buttons annoyed me. First of all, the sport mode button. Wouldn't you invest in an LED so it lights up when you press it? And when I push this thing, all the buttons move. That's not good quality. Locking the doors, there's nothing up on the top here. You just push the door lever in to lock, out to open. Last time we drove a 500, it was a C. That means it had that retractable pleated cloth top. Very cool. This car doesn't come with that, not possible on an Abarth, but you do have an optional glass moonroof. This guy's $850 additional. The frustration is that's as closed as it gets, with a mesh thing over it. There is no solid panel to draw closed. So on a hot day or during the summer, you cook all the time, at least a little bit. But you can't tell the story of a Fiat 500 Abarth inside the cabin. You got to do that under the hood. We're going there next. Now, of course, a huge part of the Abarth story is the Abarth motor. It's still a 1.4-liter inline-4 sitting this way, driving the front wheels. But once you add a turbo, everything changes. This guy goes from about 100 horsepower in a standard 500 to 160 horsepower, 170 foot-pounds of torque. It's like a different car. Gets this 2,500-pound diminutive Italian up to 60 in about 6.8, 6.9 seconds while delivering 2834 mpg. Now, another key thing here, but it's much harder to understand, is Fiat's multi-air technology. They throttle the engine by actuating the intake valves. The bottom line is you can reduce what they call pumping losses and also get very precise metering of the throttle function. 10% better power, 10% better fuel efficiency on top of what the turbo brings. Fun car is the first thing you get the impression of. It's light and tossable in a different way than a Mini. A Mini always feels kind of heavy and kind of like a sled to me. This car feels a little tippier, lighter, nimbler. And when I hit the sport mode button right here, that's going to give me sharper throttle response, so a higher graduation of the throttle curve. I'm going to also get apparently sharper steering inputs on the electric power steering rack, as I understand it. and that's about it. The next thing you notice after you get the sport dialed in and you get this guy pushed around a corner is that it rides like a truck. Although I shouldn't say that because truck makers would sue me for libel. I don't know what it rides like, but it's a jouncy little ride. Part of that is the fact that it's got the firm suspension, we've got the bigger wheels riding on 45s, and we've got almost no overhang front and rear on this car. Overhang in front and behind the axle line really does a lot to modulate a car's ride. This car doesn't really have any to do that. So I'm sure on paper, this is not the best handling car. There's no limited slip differential, it's front wheel drive, it's got a pretty simple suspension, it's a torsion bar with springs in the rear, but it adds up to more than the sum of its parts. It's fun to drive and it's got credible power where the real basic Mini does not. Okay, a 2012 500 Abarth is going to run you $22,700 delivered. It's a pretty cheap date and comes in about $1,000 below a base Mini Cooper S, by the way. The options I'd go for, $850 for the glass roof, even though you're going to get head cancer, but you have a good time doing it. $1,000 will get you these 17s. You got to think about that. As we noticed, the ride is already brutal enough. I would probably drop down to the 16s, perhaps. And then you're going to look at the $400 for that TomTom unit that I'm going to do anything else with except buy that.